He walked into the courtroom with a smile. She hadn't seen him since the day she left with his best friend. She thought he'd break, disappear. Instead, he pulled out one document. And when the judge read it out loud, her face drained, her lawyer froze, and the room went silent. What he said next? Even the bailiff leaned in. Want to know what it was? Keep watching. It was meant to be a night of celebration. Isabel, my wife, had just landed the partner title at Lockridge and Crane, a corporate law firm she treated with the same devotion others give to religion. She'd burned through weekends, skipped holidays, and let birthdays come and go, all for that glass-walled office at the top. This dinner was her moment, her parade lap, and she'd gathered her whole family to soak it in. We met at one of those sleek steakhouses downtown, the kind with lighting so soft it made everyone look like they belonged on a magazine cover. The wine list looked like a Bible, thicker than the menu itself. Isabel had reserved the seat by the panoramic window, the one framing the skyline she now saw as her own. By the time I arrived, she was already holding court like a queen. Her father, Walter, sat beside her. His silver hair was combed with surgical precision, and his blazer looked like it had been steamed seconds before he walked in. Once a senator, now a boardroom heavyweight with a new wife and 10 directorships. Across from him, Elaine, Isabel's mother, twirled her wine like she was reading prophecy in it. Always elegant, always civil. But there was something glassy in her warmth, like even kindness was a performance. Lena, Isabel's younger sister, had jetted in from LA just for the occasion. The wild one, the yoga guru with a feed full of sunrises and retreats, dressed like a festival ad. Isabel stood to make a toast, glowing with pride. I just made partner, she said, raising her glass. And my husband, well, he's still a plumber. The table roared with laughter. Even Lena, who had never worked a single shift in her life, let out this cartoonish squeal that made my stomach tighten. I turned to Isabel, but she didn't look at me. She looked right through me. She was smiling at a version of me she had shaped, the dependable blue-collar spouse who added flavor to her success story. Saying I was a plumber made her shine brighter by contrast. I gave her a smile. At least, I tried to. It cracked as soon as it formed. I lifted my glass, touched it to hers, and drank water that did nothing to wash down the bitterness creeping up my throat. Isabel loved that version of the story. Eli, the guy who unclogs sinks, she'd chuckle at events, with a tone that danced between affection and mockery. And I used to laugh along, because correcting her would have meant starting a whole new conversation. Truth is, I never minded the steel-toed boots or the grease on my hands. I always believed every job had its dignity. But I also understood the world didn't always see it that way. The waiter showed up with a tray of appetizers. I reached for a shrimp skewer, then stopped. My appetite had packed up and left. I just watched Isabel soak up the praise from her parents, the candlelight glinting off her wine glass. You've always been the brilliant one, Elaine said, her smile pulled tight like piano wire. We always knew you'd outgrow all this. Her hand waved vaguely, and her eyes never landed on me. I wondered if Isabel ever mentioned how I cooked dinner on the nights she was too burned out to lift a pan, or how I rubbed her aching feet after a brutal work week. Maybe not. Those details didn't fit her narrative. Lena leaned over, showing Isabel something on her phone. They burst into laughter. I thought about asking what it was, but then decided to let them stay inside that bubble they had built without me. And then Elaine's phone lit up. She picked it up, squinting. Her face shifted, eyes narrowing, then suddenly widening. Her voice tightened. Isabel, she said, still looking at the screen. Why does it say your husband's company is valued at $1 billion in the Wall Street Journal? The room froze. Even the forks went quiet. Every head turned toward me. Even Isabel stared like she was seeing me for the initial time. What's she talking about? She asked, voice sharp, like I'd crossed some invisible boundary. I sat back, calm. I let the silence do its work. The truth had always been there, just buried beneath assumptions and performance. Elaine shoved her phone across the table. The headline was plain as day. Ironclad Systems valued at $1.2 billion amid acquisition talks. My name wasn't there, but the company's was. Isabel looked at me, mouth slightly open, wineglass frozen midair. Eli, she asked, voice cracking. Is that true? I nodded once. Yeah, Ironclad's mine. I saw it land, the timeline, the missed clues, the hours I spent at the shop. Her brain was sprinting to catch up. I spoke before she could. But hey, I'm just a plumber, right? Her glass hit the table with a hollow clink. Tension poured into the room like a broken pipe. Lena stared at her screen, the caption she'd been drafting now forgotten. Walter sat motionless, skin pale as whetstone. I could almost see the math running through his head. Elaine gripped her glass like it might steady her. For the initial time in years, they weren't looking past me. They were seeing me. Not the cardboard cutout Isabel brought to functions. Not the prop in her success story. Just me. The man who had quietly built something while they all smiled for photos. I didn't say another word. I picked up my water, took a sip, and let the room sit with the truth. Isabel searched my face, looking for the version of me she used to narrate. He wasn't there anymore. This night had been her crown, her stage. But the spotlight had shifted, and all I did was wait for it. It wasn't revenge. It was real. And real, I'd learned, always outlasted fiction. They had no clue I owned Ironclad Systems, a private company that builds AI tools to monitor municipal infrastructure. I never put my name in the spotlight. My CTO handled the press. Everyone just assumed I turned wrenches for a living. And I let them. Even Isabel, who once claimed to love every part of me, my mind, my drive, my stubborn streak, had no idea. Titles meant the world to her. Being partner at Lockridge and Crane became her identity. Me? I liked the quiet. I liked letting my work speak without needing applause or a shiny nameplate. Ironclad was born in the back corner of the library while I was finishing my master's in fluid engineering. I'd become obsessed with the city's aging pipes and how much money was being flushed away through leaks and cracks. Cities were bleeding budgets trying to patch disasters after the damage was already done. I saw a better way. So I started sketching ideas. Writing code. Building. I created a system that could predict breakdowns before they happened. Not flashy, but effective. It saved cities millions. And by the time I landed my first contract, with a small but smart water district in Pennsylvania, nobody was laughing. When Isabel first started out at Lockridge and Crane, she was drowning in pressure, long days, longer nights. I didn't want to weigh her down with what I was working on. I'd come home, hands stained from the day, but heart full of something I was quietly building. She'd be too deep in case law to notice, so I'd kiss her forehead and let her drift off. Meanwhile, I kept grinding, adding one engineer, one coder at a time. Word got around. We didn't advertise. We just delivered. Our software started predicting over 82% of pipeline failures before they happened. Just in Philadelphia, the system saved the city over $14 million in half a year. But whenever we visited Isabel's parents, I was still the guy in the background, the subject of polite little jokes about plungers and broken faucets. And she never once stepped in to say otherwise. At first, I brushed it off. I'd sit there with a drink in hand, nodding like I was in on the joke. It became my shield, really. No one ever asked the plumber to cut a check for their charity gala or join some advisory board. I got to be invisible, and that suited me fine. I actually enjoyed watching how people treated me when they thought I had nothing to offer. Spoiler? They failed miserably. Her dad, Walter, loved being the center of attention, talking stocks, politics, and all the ways he'd fix the world if it would just listen. He looked at me like I was part of the furniture. A living nod to the working class. Isabel's quaint blue-collar husband. He didn't talk with me, just at me. Elaine was more careful. She'd ask how my day went in this airy tone, like the answer wouldn't be worth much. And Lena? She was usually too wrapped up in editing her next beach photo to even notice I existed. Isabel would squeeze my knee under the table sometimes, her silent way of saying sorry. But it always felt more like a signal. Don't rock the boat. Don't rewrite the story. Stay in character. So I did. I played my part. Let them believe I was the lucky tradesman who landed a high-powered wife. While behind the scenes, I sat in dusty rooms with my CTO and CFO, signing licensing deals with water utilities that dropped seven-figure wires into our account by morning. I built a team of engineers and coders, people who were told their ideas wouldn't ever matter. I gave them purpose. I gave them the freedom to be great without having to be known. Ironclad never needed a frontman. The tech spoke loud enough. I didn't need the spotlight. But sometimes, driving home from the lab at 2 a.m., clutching a lukewarm gas station coffee, I'd think about Isabel and how long it had been since she asked me what I was working on. In the beginning, she used to ask questions. Real ones. About the tech, the mission, the big picture. But somewhere along the way, the answers stopped matching. She got so focused on her climb, she didn't notice I was scaling something of my own, something bigger than a corner desk or a nameplate. At initial, I didn't take it personally. I'd watch her light up when she talked about making partner, and I'd tell her she earned it. Because she had. She gave up weekends, worked herself raw for that firm. But I was building too. just in a different direction. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being us and started being her and the plumber. She didn't know we'd already inked deals with half a dozen East Coast cities, or that Axiom Holdings had reached out about an acquisition that could send our valuation into the stratosphere. She didn't know. The man she kept referring to as just a plumber was about to become one of the quiet giants in municipal tech. I never corrected her. Part of me wanted to see who she really was when there was no wealth dangling in front of her. And part of me, maybe the bigger part, just wanted to feel what it was like to hold the truth in my pocket. Not as ammunition, but as proof that I didn't need her to believe in me for any of it to be real. When the Wall Street Journal article hit, my CFO sent it over with a one-liner. "Looks like the cat's out of the bag." I stared at that headline, Ironclad Systems, the billion-dollar underground giant, and thought about every dinner where I let them believe I was small. Let Isabel stack her story on top of me like I was a stepping stone. And now, every brick they thought was a joke had turned into the foundation of something they never saw coming. Just a plumber. I actually smiled. Back when I met Isabel, I was finishing up my master's in fluid engineering. I was juggling coursework and half a dozen jobs just to stay afloat. Plumbing was one of them. I installed water heaters, cleared out clogged lines, fixed leaks no one wanted to talk about in public. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. I liked the hands-on problem solving, the way it felt to actually fix something broken. It kept the bills paid while I stayed up at night with blueprints and algorithms. Isabel was already deep into her third year at the firm. She walked like she had somewhere important to be, always clutching a pile of legal pads like they held state secrets. She'd breeze into the cafe I worked at, eyes glued to her briefs, barely noticing the coffee splashes on my jeans. But that drive, that laser focus, it pulled me in. She looked up from her laptop once, eyebrows raised. "What are you reading?" she asked, nodding toward my worn engineering book and half-eaten bagel. That's how it all started. She liked how curious I was. I liked her fire. I really believed she saw who I was, the guy who stayed up nights building fluid models that could change city infrastructure. The guy who believed in smarter systems and safer futures. And, in the beginning, maybe she did. We'd meet for quick bites between shifts, talking about dreams that felt too big to say out loud. She told me I had drive, that I was going places. I remember the way she'd touch my jaw, looking at me like I was already there. "We're going to be unstoppable," she'd whisper. But that vision shifted. Slowly, like fog rolling in at dusk. I can't say when exactly it changed, but I remember how it felt. Like watching a candle go out one breath at a time. Maybe it was the night she introduced me at her firm's holiday party. "Eli," she smiled, "he's a plumber." She said it like it was a joke. A sweet little detail meant to prove she wasn't shallow. That she could love a man without cufflinks or a business card. Of course I smiled. Of course I played along. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, because deep down, I knew what I was really creating. But each time she made that joke, at dinners, at work events, even in passing, it felt like something inside me chipped away. Like I was becoming just another supporting character in the script she'd written for her life. Isabel, the legal powerhouse, married to the quiet, reliable guy who was easy to manage. "You're so simple. So dependable," she said one night, her head resting against my shoulder after another long day. She meant it as a compliment, like I was a household appliance. I laughed, but that word stuck. Simple. Dependable. Like a Labrador who never runs off. Like I've been trained. Like she'd picked me from a shelf, confident I'd stay loyal, stay tame, stay in line. Back then, I brushed it off. I believed we were stronger than that. I chalked it up to stress, or burnout, or whatever excuse made it easier to swallow. But over time, the jokes stopped being jokes. They became background noise. The steady hum beneath our life together. Isabel, the rising star. And me, the blue-collar footnote. I tried, at first. I'd mention a new project I was working on, or casually reference a big meeting coming up. But she'd nod, her eyes already sliding back to her phone, lost in a thread with clients or partners. She was busy winning, and I was busy letting her. Could I have corrected her? Absolutely. But I didn't. Maybe I was testing her. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd ever pull back the curtain and look. If she'd ever turn to me, not the version she used for social credit, but the real me. If she'd ever just ask, "Eli, what are you building?" But she never did. She liked the version that made her shine brighter. The one that added contrast. The success story with a humble, quiet man beside her. Sometimes I'd watch her in the mornings, suit sharp, hair flawless, and wonder if she remembered that guy in the cafe. The one with the coffee-stained jeans and big ideas in his head. The one who wanted to rebuild cities from the inside out. While she posted hashtag Monday Motivation with espresso cups and courtroom smiles, I was deep in the lab, helping our AI models predict pipe collapses down to a street name. While she was pitching to partners, I was locking in deals with utility boards that would reshape entire city systems. I was building something real, something that would outlast the applause. And yet, at every dinner party, every casual get-together, every after-hours hangout with her firm, I was just the plumber. And she never corrected them. Not once. She never paused to ask what lay behind my tired smile, or why my eyes looked hollow some nights. She didn't see the hours I poured into my team after midnight. The people I led. The work we were doing. To her, I was just safe, predictable, forgettable. It's strange how people can say they love you and yet never truly see you. But maybe it's not blindness. Maybe it's easier that way, to ignore what doesn't fit the narrative. To keep the story clean. The hierarchy stable. She needed that. And I let her have it, thinking one day she'd remember the truth beneath the image. Turns out, I was wrong. While she polished her persona for the world, I stayed late in that tiny, windowless office. A single room with a flickering light bulb and a shared bathroom that always smelled faintly of paint thinner. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And in that little box of a space, we built something that no one saw coming. We were the nobodies. The late-night grinders. Our lives lit by vending machines and blinking servers. We ran on bad coffee and sheer belief. We revised our algorithm over and over, chasing perfection. And eventually, we caught it. Our diagnostic tools could now forecast over 82% of pipe failures before they even happened. Cities were saving millions, preventing disasters, reclaiming lost funds. But at Isabel's family dinners, no one asked about any of that. No one was curious about the hours I spent pitching to skeptical public works directors, or the calls I made to hardened engineers who thought tech guys in denim didn't understand their world. They saw Isabel shine, her paycheck, her posture, and then they'd glance at me like I was a charity case. Her latest community service project? Her father would talk finance like it was a divine language. Her mother would sip wine and wax poetic about the family's political legacy like it was something sacred, something not to be diluted by people who got grease under their nails. Lena would pose for selfies, slap a filter on them, and caption it, "Power Couple Night," like I was a prop she borrowed from Isabel's closet. And every time, Isabel would smile and rest her hand on my knee under the table, like that was supposed to be enough. That was when I started to see the truth. She didn't want a partner. She wanted contrast. She wanted to be the brilliant lawyer with the modest husband. It gave her social clout, made her seem grounded, humble, kind. The woman who didn't need to marry her equal because she was just that generous. But while she curated her life, while she pushed for another late night at the firm, I was sitting in high-level briefings with the Department of Water Management, signing contracts that would change how cities across the country monitor their pipelines. We were reshaping aging infrastructure. In Philly alone, we saved $14 million in 6 months. That wasn't a pipe dream. That was fact. Measurable. Concrete. But over at her parents' house, I was still the guy who fixed rates. One night, I remember it clearly, her father leaned back in his chair, a cigar perched between his fingers, and looked me dead in the eye. "So, Eli," he asked, "when are you going to get serious about your career?" Then came the part that stuck. "Isabel's doing all the heavy lifting, you know." And she laughed. Not a big laugh. Just a little one. Dismissive. Almost sweet. "Dad," she said, barely glancing at me, "Eli's fine. He likes what he does." She said it like I was a kid who collected bottle caps and called it a business. Like I wasn't doing anything serious. That moment right there? That was the one. That was when it hit me. In their eyes, and maybe even in hers, I wasn't building anything that mattered. At some point, I realized I wasn't really a partner in her life. I was just there, filling a seat at the table, a name on a +1. I played along, mostly to see how long it would take before anyone noticed the cracks in the story they kept telling themselves. But no one ever did. Spoiler alert, no one ever does. Meanwhile, my team and I were grinding in silence. Ironclad was scaling fast, record quarters, new hires, real traction. We even started collecting awards, the kind with shiny logos and press releases. The kind her father probably would have bragged about if he ever asked. But I never brought them home. I didn't flash headlines or pass around articles. I was watching how they all treated the man they thought I was. The guy who got lucky. The guy who should just be grateful to sit at their table. People say they crave authenticity, but the second it doesn't match their version of the truth, they push it away like a bad reflection. That's why I kept my wins to myself. Not just from Isabel. From everyone. I wanted to know who stayed when there was nothing to gain. Who showed up for me. Spoiler alert, very few did. So I kept sitting there, smiling quietly as they clinked glasses and debated politics and bragged about beach homes. And every time I did, I wondered what would happen when the truth finally surfaced. When the man they dismissed as the plumber turned out to be worth more than their entire family tree of law degrees combined. I wondered what would happen when the guy they treated like background noise turned out to be holding all the cards. I wondered what Isabel would do when she realized the man she married wasn't the character she'd been selling to her friends all these years. So I listened to her father rant about politics. I nodded as Elaine talked about her college years like they were a lineage. I let Lena make her shallow jokes and duck-face selfies. I let them call me a handyman while I signed 7-figure deals and negotiated with federal departments. And you know what? I learned more in those moments than I ever did in grad school. People cling to whatever story makes them feel tallest. It's the underestimation principle. Let them assume you're small. Let them laugh. Let them look past you. Because when the truth hits, the silence in the room is the sweetest sound you'll ever hear. So I sipped my water. I smiled. I waited. Because I knew that day was coming. The day they'd all want to know the man behind the wrench. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. Isabel referred to me as utility class in front of her coworkers. At first, I thought I misheard. We were at one of those rooftop events, polished people in custom suits, sipping drinks they'd barely tasted, laughing too loud. The city stretched behind us like a postcard, and I was thinking about the Boston deal Ironclad had just locked down, another massive step forward. I'd planned to tell her that night, to share just how far we'd come. But before I could say anything, she introduced me to her colleague Derek. And she laughed. He's utility class, she said, like it was cute. Keeps things running. Derek grinned, gave me a half-hearted handshake, and I felt heat flush through my skin. But I swallowed it and shook his hand. Utility class. She said it like a compliment, like I was part of the machine that made her life easier. But I caught the subtext. I'd seen that look in her eyes before, when she skimmed past Ironclad's latest press mention to like a photo of a startup founder in a blazer. When her father praised her over dinner and pretended I wasn't there. When her mother raised a glass to Isabel's accomplishments and never once asked what I'd been working on. I was the support beam. The background hum. I told myself it was just another throwaway joke. But they kept coming. She started texting things like, "Can you grab the dry cleaning on your way back?" And "Utility class hero to the rescue." Like I was her driver. Like I didn't have a company to run. But the final straw came when she left me off the guest list for her firm's Aspen retreat. We talked about that trip for months, a weekend to finally reconnect. I cleared my schedule, pushed meetings, warned my team I'd be offline. But 3 days before the flight, she looked across the dinner table and said it flatly. "I don't think you'd fit in, Eli. It's just lawyers. White shoe crowd. You'd be bored." She smiled like she was offering me a kindness. But I saw the truth behind it. She'd already made the call. I wanted to ask if she'd been bored sitting through my investor dinner, or the water management conference where she sat beside me during my keynote. But I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Sure. Enjoy it. Because in her world, I wasn't a founder. I was filler. I wasn't someone to make room for. I was something she edited out. A detail she left behind when the scene got too elite. I went back to work. Back to Ironclad. We were finalizing a breakthrough, an update that would change how over 100 cities manage their infrastructure. A federal pilot program. A landmark contract. The kind that would make national headlines. The kind that cements legacies. And back home, I was the guy holding her coat at cocktail events. The husband who got left off RSVPs. One night she breezed in, windblown and glowing. "The retreat was amazing," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "I wish you'd been there." I almost asked, "Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you insist I belonged?" But I didn't. I just smiled. "How was it?" She beamed, diving into stories about partner dinners, standing ovations, and side jokes. I nodded along, thinking about the contracts I'd signed while she was gone, and how not one person at her table knew what I'd built. That's what finally did it, I think. That moment of absolute clarity. The realization that she didn't see me. Not really. And maybe she didn't want to. She'd crafted a version of me she could carry like a handbag. Something to show her balance, her humility. Something safe. Predictable. Forgettable. That night, after she went to bed, I opened the email from my CFO. Wall Street Journal was about to run the piece. Ironclad Systems. $1 billion valuation. Acquisition buzz. National attention. And me? I didn't feel proud. Or vindicated. Or smug. I just felt tired. Tired of being the utility class. Tired of blending into the background. Tired of waiting for someone, especially her, to finally see what I had built. I could have told her. I could have walked into that bedroom and held up the article. But I didn't. Because by then, I already knew. But I stayed quiet. I wanted to see if silence would do what words never could, if she'd finally look closer, even for a third. Spoiler? She didn't. The next morning, she gave me a bright kiss on the cheek, grabbed her briefcase, and chirped, "Have a great day, Eli." Oh, and don't forget the dry cleaning. Her heels echoed down the hallway like little reminders of how far apart we'd grown. I made myself a coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled up that email again. There it was, in black and white, a $1 billion valuation with my name quietly buried in the fine print. The same name she'd left off the Aspen invite. I stared at it for a moment, then smiled to myself. They'd all know soon enough. And when they did, I'd be the one holding the invitation everyone suddenly wanted. I didn't have some big plan for revenge. I didn't need one. I wasn't angry, I was just exhausted. Worn down by the looks, the offhand comments, the laughter that always landed a little too sharp whenever someone at dinner called me the plumber. I kept the peace. I avoided the drama. Let them believe they had me figured out. But deep down, I was waiting. Waiting for the truth to shatter the illusion they'd all clung to like it was gospel. That moment arrived on a Thursday morning. My CFO forwarded an email flagged high priority. A Wall Street Journal journalist had connected the dots between Ironclad and Axiom Holdings. She dug into the federal contracts, the predictive tech, the cost savings in Philadelphia. She linked public filings and investor whispers, pulled together a valuation that made my chest tighten. Over $1 billion. There it was, laid out clearly, undeniably. Numbers and names. My company. My work. My story. Suddenly lit up in a spotlight I'd carefully avoided for years. I leaned back in my chair and let the weight of it hit. I'd built this thing in silence, while letting them all think I was just some guy with a tool belt and a van. And now the lights were about to flip on. But I didn't rush to call my team. I didn't email Isabel. I didn't do anything. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I RSVP'd, yes, to the family dinner Isabel had planned for Saturday. It was supposed to be her celebration, a toast to her promotion. I could already picture Elaine ordering wine by the crate, her father polishing off another speech he'd written to himself in the mirror. Lena would be there too, probably live-streaming Isabel's rise with her latest set of filters. But I kept thinking, what would they say when the article hit the table with their eggs and coffee? Would they be proud? Would they be ashamed? Would Isabel even know how to react once the truth slipped through the cracks of her perfect story? Friday came. The article dropped. The headline? Ironclad Systems, the $1 billion plumber. I had to admit, it was catchy. The journalist knew what she was doing. It was the kind of hook that people passed around on LinkedIn with captions like, "Never underestimate anyone." The kind that started whispers in boardrooms and sparked side conversations in Isabel's office. For so long, I'd kept my success under wraps, tucked away beneath silence and steel. Seeing it in ink didn't feel like triumph. It felt surreal. Eli Granger, founder and CEO. I thought about calling her. Thought about giving her a heads up. But then I remembered Aspen. The cocktail parties. The dry cleaner jokes. The way she laughed with her friends while I smiled through it. So I let her read it with the rest of the world. Saturday night came. I didn't dress up. No suit. No tie. Just jeans and a button-down, the same man they'd always brushed off. That was important. I needed them to see that the guy they looked through was the same one who had built something bigger than all their status combined. The house smelled like garlic and roasted meat when I walked in. Elaine was in the kitchen, snapping at the caterer. Her father had already claimed his throne at the head of the table, cradling a glass of scotch and commanding the room with that politician's bravado. Lena was curled on the couch, eyes fixed on her phone screen like it held the secrets of the universe. Isabel greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. "Hey, Han. Thanks for coming." She smiled like everything was still intact. Like the floor hadn't already shifted beneath her. Dinner started like every other one. Her father stood up first, delivering a grand speech about Isabel's drive, her discipline, her unshakable ambition. Lena took pictures between bites. Elaine dabbed at her eyes. The clinking of glasses echoed around the room. They were all celebrating the star they had built together. Then Isabel rose, wine glass in hand. She looked around the table with the confidence of a closing argument. "I just wanted to say thank you to all of you," she said smoothly. "This journey wasn't easy, but I couldn't have done it without my family and my cat." She paused, then turned to me with a soft smile. "And to Eli. You've always been my rock." The room applauded. I forced a grin. That's when Elaine's phone buzzed. She glanced at it casually, then stopped. Her face dropped. "Isabel?" she said, her voice suddenly unsure. "Why is your husband's company valued at $1 billion in the Wall Street Journal?" Silence. Even the caterer froze. Everyone turned toward me. Isabel looked like she'd been slapped. Her voice cracked. "Eli, is that true?" I nodded, slowly. "Yeah. Ironclad is mine." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her father's scotch hung midair, untouched. Lena's phone was now pointed directly at me, recording, of course. I stood, the sound of my chair scraping louder than anything else in the room. "But I'm just a plumber," I said, letting it hang there. "Remember?" No one laughed. No one moved. For the initial time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't Isabel's husband. I wasn't the guy with the wrench. I was the man who built an empire while they weren't looking. And in that stillness, where no one had anything clever to say, I realized something. I didn't need revenge. The truth had already done the work. The room felt like a theater frozen mid-scene. Every face locked on mine. Every breath held. It was like the entire evening had been rewound, waiting for this single moment. Her father blinked first. He placed his glass down with a soft clink, his hand trembling slightly. "Eli, is this some kind of joke?" His voice was shaky, hollow, like he needed me to say it wasn't real, like the truth didn't fit into the neat little box where he kept his version of me. I met his eyes and didn't flinch. All the years I'd kept my head down, biting my tongue, nodding politely, they'd hardened into something solid, something that didn't shake anymore. "No joke," I said, calm as ever. "Ironclad is mine. I built it. The contracts, the technology, the valuation. Every piece of it is real." Isabel's lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Her eyes darted back and forth from me to the phone in Elaine's hand, the one still glowing with the article that had ripped through the story she'd been telling herself for years. I wondered how many times she'd told that story at fundraisers, at law firm dinners, over drinks with colleagues. Eli the plumber, her simple, dependable husband. No ego, no spotlight, no ambition to interrupt hers. Did she ever stop to think how fragile that lie really was? The air in the room shifted. I could feel it, like something deep beneath us had cracked and moved. The quiet kind of shift you only feel when everything's about to change. Lena's phone was still aimed at me. Her thumb hovered, unsure whether to keep filming or lower the camera. I met her gaze and gave her a single nod. Let her film. Let them all see what they missed. Walter leaned forward, the old confidence gone from his face. There was something human there now. Something shaky. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. His voice landed somewhere between confusion and accusation. I shrugged. "I didn't think it mattered to you," I said simply. Every time I sat at this table, the conversation was about Isabel, her milestones, her next promotion. No one ever asked what I was working on. No one ever cared. His jaw moved, but no words came. Elaine lowered her glass slowly, the sound of it touching the table barely audible. "We didn't know," she said softly. Her voice had lost all its gloss. It was almost childlike. I nodded once. "Exactly. You didn't want to know. You liked the version of me that fit neatly into your story. The quiet one. The helper. The plumber who didn't make noise." Isabel's hands were clenched together in her lap, knuckles white. "Eli," she began, voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? We're supposed to be a team." I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "A team?" I echoed, keeping my voice steady. "Like when you left me out of the Aspen retreat. When you called me utility class to your colleagues. That kind of team." Her face went pale. Her lips trembled. "Eli, I cut her off gently. "You didn't want a partner, Isabel. You wanted a backdrop. Someone quiet, someone simple, someone who wouldn't interrupt your story. And I let you have that. I let you tell the world your version of me because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I had nothing left to offer." The room fell completely silent. Even Lena's phone was shaking now. I wondered if, in that moment, she was finally seeing her sister clearly. Tears filled Isabel's eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. And I believed her. That was the saddest part. She hadn't known because she never looked. Because she never wanted to. Her father cleared his throat and forced a smile that looked like it hurt to wear. "Well, Eli," he said slowly, "now that the truth's out, maybe we can work together. There's potential political partnerships, business angles." I shook my head. "That's not why I'm here," I said. "I didn't come to cut a deal. I came because I'm done pretending." Elaine reached across the table, her hand hovering like she wasn't sure how to bridge the space between us. "We always believed in you, Eli," she said, sweet as syrup. "Family," she added. That word. It tasted like iron. I looked back at Isabel. Tears streamed down her face. Her whole world, carefully assembled and beautifully curated, was unraveling right there in her dining room. "Eli, please," she said, her voice rising. "Don't do this here." But I'd had enough of later. I pushed my chair back, the sound scraping across the floor like punctuation. "No," I said firmly. "We're doing it here. Because for years, I let you tell everyone who I was. I played the role you gave me. I let you use me as part of your image, this whole story about being grounded, about balance. You laughed at me. And I stayed silent because I thought you'd eventually see past the surface." Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. I couldn't tell if she was crying for me or for herself. I looked around the room at all of them. "Elaine, Walter, Lena, you all got the version of me you wanted," I said. "But the truth? It was always there. You just had to look." Then I turned to Isabel, this woman I once loved, this woman who taught me just how small people can make you feel. "I'm leaving now," I said. "Enjoy the dinner." And just like that, I walked out. No applause. No raised glasses. Just silence. And for the initial time in years, I felt light. Because now they knew. And I didn't have to be their plumber anymore. Behind me, voices erupted. Walter's was the loudest, sharp with disbelief. "You built that," he shouted. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Elaine looked at me like I'd sprouted wings. Lena sat motionless, her phone forgotten. And Isabel? She didn't move. She just stared. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I paused at the edge of the room, my hand resting on the back of the chair I'd just left behind. "Yeah," I said. My voice was calm. "I built it." Ironclad started as a sketch on a napkin in a diner my last year of grad school. I looked straight at them. I saw a problem. No one was fixing the country's aging water systems. Billions of gallons lost. No urgency. So I did something about it. Walter's mouth twitched, his mask slipping. "But he stopped himself. But I knew what he almost said. "We all did." "Plumber?" I asked, finishing the sentence for him. My voice didn't rise. "Yeah, I've done plumbing work. I still do sometimes. There's honesty in fixing something that's broken. But Ironclad? That's more than pipes. It's AI, predictive tech. It's cities saving millions. It's thousands of brilliant people building something that works. It's the future. And it's mine." Isabel opened her mouth, but her voice came out paper-thin. "Eli, why didn't you tell me?" I met her eyes, those same eyes that used to see me like I was the answer to every question she never knew how to ask. "Because I needed to know," I said. "I needed to know who would love me for me. Not for headlines. Not for a billion-dollar company. Just for the man who walked in the door at the end of the day." I swallowed hard, feeling the years of quiet hurt settle like dust in my chest. "Here's your spoiler," I said, my voice low. "You all failed the test." Isabel's face crumpled. Her tears came fast, but I held firm. I wasn't cruel, but I didn't bend either. I turned to Walter, still fumbling to connect the man he ignored with the man who now owned something bigger than any of his carefully brokered deals. "You never asked what I did," I said, flat and clear. "You always asked how my day was, like the answer didn't matter. Because in your mind, you already had it." He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then I looked at Elaine. "You treated me like a story. A novelty. Something to bring up at brunch so your friends could marvel at how your daughter married down. But you never asked why I was always back at the lab at midnight. Why I missed golf outings. Why I was always buried in something you never cared to see." Her hand trembled around her wine glass like it might spill. "Eli, we didn't know," she whispered. "No," I said, voice sharpening. "You thought I was simple. You all did. You thought I was the sidekick in Isabel's narrative." I paused. But that's the thing about stories, sometimes the one you overlook turns out to be the one writing it. It hit me all at once. All those years. All the dinners, the silence, the jokes I let land so everyone else could feel bigger. And I let it go. Isabel's voice cracked. "Eli, please." "You didn't mean to not see me," I said, cutting her off gently, "but you didn't see me all the same." She blinked through tears, frozen. You were too busy building a perfect life on paper to realize there was more to me than the guy who held your coat. I let that one land. It hung in the room, solid and final. That's on you. Walter cleared his throat, trying to rally his old tone of importance. Well, now that this is out in the open, Eli, perhaps we can discuss the possibilities. I see a lot of potential here. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Opportunities. I echoed. You think I need you? I shook my head. I built Ironclad without your help, without your network, without your blessing. I did it because I believed in the work. And I'm not trading any of that in just to sit at your table. I looked up, calm. I've got my own table now. Lena finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. So, you really built all of that? I nodded. She glanced down at her phone, her usual shine gone. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize that the real thing doesn't need a filter. I took a breath, letting the moment settle. Look, I said, softening not to comfort, but to clarify. I didn't come here to rub your faces in it. I came because I'm tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending to be the man you all decided I was. I'm not that man. I turned to Isabel. Her shoulders had caved in. Her mascara streaked. I needed to know who loved me before the billion. And now I do. She opened her mouth, but the sound caught in her throat. Eli. I shook my head gently. I can't keep shrinking so you can shine. I can't be small so you can be big. The knot in my chest loosened. The weight I'd carried for years began to lift. I hope someday you understand that. The room was silent. Even the caterer had vanished. All that remained was the truth, and the people who had missed it. I stood straighter, heart steady. Ironclad is mine, I said. And so is my future. Then I turned and walked toward the door, each step echoing like a beat of something new. For the initial time in years, I wasn't walking away. I was walking toward something. As I reached the hall, I heard Isabel's voice behind me. Broken. Eli, please. I paused, hand on the doorknob, and turned just enough to meet her eyes. You always wanted the man who'd stand behind you, I said. Turns out, I was always the man who'd stand on his own. And I walked out, leaving behind the questions they never thought to ask, the assumptions they never challenged. I didn't need their validation. I already had something better. My own. By the time I reached the driveway, my phone lit up with her name. 3 missed calls in a row. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She'd already said everything she needed to, with every polite jab, every missed invitation, every time she called me utility class like it was cute. Now she wanted to talk. Now she wanted to fix it. I could picture her pacing, spinning the perfect apology, trying to dress her regret up in the right language. But I was done with words that came too late. The next morning, her email came in. Subject, we need to talk. I opened it slowly, half expecting something heartfelt. Instead, it was calculated. Eli, I'm sorry for how last night went. I was caught off guard and didn't handle it well. I just wish you'd told me about Ironclad. We could have leveraged it, used it to build our future. Let's talk. We're a team. Isabel. I stared at the screen, coffee growing cold in my hand. Leverage. That was the word that caught in my throat. To her, my company was just a talking point. A brand booster. A shiny new piece to add to her image. I thought about all the nights I'd come home exhausted but buzzing with energy from a major deal, and how she'd barely glance up from her phone. I remembered her calling me utility class like it was endearing, like it was accurate, and never once correcting herself. That wasn't a partnership. That was a business arrangement. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened the envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. A separation agreement. Something I quietly prepared after Aspen. After it finally hit me that she didn't see me, not really. I never wanted to use it. I kept hoping she'd look at me and see more. But she didn't. That afternoon, I walked into the living room. She was already waiting, still in her sleek work dress, as if this was just another case to argue. Eli, she started, her voice trembling with effort. We've been through so much. Don't throw that away. I sat down calm. Isabel, I said softly. I love the woman I thought you were. The one who stayed up studying for the bar, who lit up talking about her first big case. I looked her in the eyes. But somewhere along the way, you stopped asking about me. You stopped caring about the man behind the work boots. That's not fair. It's perfectly fair, I said, cutting in before she could rewrite the truth. My voice wasn't loud, just steady. Every time you called me just a plumber. Every time you left me off a guest list. Every time you told people I was utility class. You told me exactly who you thought I was. She blinked, her eyes glistening. I was under pressure. Your job didn't make you look down on me, I said. That part. That was all you. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I'd been holding onto longer than I cared to admit. This is a separation agreement. I already signed it. You can hand it off to one of your lawyer friends if you want a second opinion. Her face crumpled. She reached for my hand. Eli, please. Don't do this. We can fix it. We can still be a team. I gently pulled my hand away. No, I said softly. You never wanted a team. You wanted a story. The successful partner with the dependable husband in the background. That's not me anymore. Her tears came harder now, her shoulders trembling. I didn't mean to. But you did, I said, rising to my feet. Every laugh, every dismissal, every moment I stood behind you while you smiled for the world. You meant it. I looked down at her, and for the initial time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't feel small. I felt like myself. She tried again, her voice breaking. Please, Eli, don't throw this away. I shook my head slowly. You threw it away every time you chose your image over your husband. I walked toward the door. At the threshold, I stopped and glanced back one last time. You'll be fine, Isabel. You always know how to land on your feet. But I need to be somewhere I can breathe. She sobbed, but I didn't turn back. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. It felt like turning the last page of a book I'd let go on far too long. Outside, the sky was streaked with color. Sunset painted everything in gold and fire. The air smelled like freedom. I took a long breath. The weight of pretending, of shrinking, of waiting. It fell from my shoulders like a coat I didn't need anymore. For the initial time in years, I felt like me. My phone buzzed again. I didn't have to check to know it was her. I silenced it and kept walking. Some things, once broken, don't go back to the way they were. And I was done letting her hold the pieces. 8 months later, Ironclad was a different beast altogether. No longer the quiet contender. Now we were a force. A leader. The name every city was talking about when it came to infrastructure. We'd finalized the merger with Axiom Holdings. The valuation? North of $1.6 billion. But it wasn't about the money. It was about ownership. About building something on my terms. About taking what we'd created and turning it into the standard for cities that had been struggling for decades. I kept my old office. Same cracked walls. Same faded carpet. Same vending machine humming in the corner like an old friend. I tried the fancy high-rise once, but it felt like a movie set. Something that would have made Isabel's family proud. But not me. That morning, I sat in my small office and watched the sun break over the skyline. Not just light, but clarity. My team now worked out of our expansion campus across town, a top-tier facility filled with the best minds in the country. But I liked it here. The quiet. The ghosts of old meetings. The echo of late-night wins. This place reminded me of where it all started. My work boots were still under the desk. The same toolbox I'd carried back when people laughed at the idea that a plumber could code AI. People called me a tech visionary now. Investors wanted my ear. Mayors called for advice. Every time I stepped into a boardroom, I saw it in their eyes, that mix of recognition and respect. The hush that settles right before someone important speaks. But me? I hadn't changed much. Still wore jeans. Still kept a wrench in the trunk, just in case. Because deep down, I was still that guy who started out fixing pipes in basements that smelled like mold and lost hope. I'd never be too good to do the work. I learned a lot in those 6 months. About power. About silence. About how fragile some people become when they can't shape your story anymore. Isabel tried everything. Calls. Texts. Emails. She even showed up once, tears in her eyes, voice shaking. She said she was sorry. She said she got caught up. Said we could build a future now together. That her success was mine, too. But I could see it in her face. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry for how it looked. Sorry the story collapsed in front of an audience she couldn't manage. I listened. And then I told her the same thing I told myself the night I walked out of her parents' dining room. I couldn't be small anymore. Not for anyone. She hadn't loved me. She loved the version of me that fit neatly into her image. The man who made her look powerful and generous. I didn't hate her for it. I just didn't want to live in someone else's shadow anymore. Sometimes I still saw her on social media. Glass of wine in hand. Perfect caption. Practice smile. Still performing. I wondered if she'd found someone new to play the part one once did. I hoped so. Not out of spite, but because I no longer wanted to be part of the act. Ironclad's new partnership opened doors I never thought I'd walk through. 17 cities and counting. Our AI systems were changing the way water was managed, stopping disasters, saving millions. Every time we inked a new deal, every time a city manager called to say, "You saved us," I felt it. That same spark I had that first night I sketched out a solution on a napkin. One afternoon, as I reviewed a rollout plan for Chicago, my CTO Jared knocked lightly on the door. "Hey, boss," he said, grin wide. "You'll want to see this." He handed me his tablet. There it was, a full feature in Business Insider. The plumber who built an empire. I let out a quiet laugh. The headline echoed that moment in Isabel's dining room. The silence. The shock. The shift. "Look at this," Jared said, practically buzzing. "They're calling you the guy who changed the way cities handle water forever." I skimmed the article. It was flattering, sure. But what caught my attention wasn't the numbers or the praise. It was the last line. A quote they'd pulled from an old interview. Something I'd almost forgotten. I said, "I'll never stop being a plumber at heart." And I meant it. I'd never stop getting my hands dirty. That part of me wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't just a job. It was who I was. The guy who fixes things. The one who sees a problem and refuses to look away. Jared was still standing by the door, tablet in hand, his smile fading as he caught something in my expression. "You good, boss?" he asked. I nodded, slow but certain. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." And for once, I really meant it. That evening, I packed up and headed out. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of pink and gold in the sky like a promise whispered quietly. I took the long way home. I drove through the neighborhoods where I used to patch leaking pipes and unclog rusted drains. Those streets had taught me more than how to twist a wrench. They taught me how to read people, how to keep my head down and listen, how to know when it was time to stop playing along. At a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I didn't see the man Isabel used to describe at parties. I saw a man in his late 30s. A little worn, a little wiser, a hell of a lot stronger than the guy who used to smile through being called utility class. I didn't need anyone else to define me anymore. I'd written my story with my own hands, and it didn't need polishing. It didn't need applause. When I got home, I kicked off my boots and left my toolbox by the door, the same place it had always gone. Some habits, like I said, are hard to break. I made a simple dinner. Nothing fancy. Just enough. Cracked open a beer. Sat at the table. The house was quiet. And for the initial time in a long time, that silence felt like peace, not absence. Later, I stepped outside. The stars were scattered across the night sky like broken glass. Sharp, beautiful, and endless. I stood there a while, thinking about the road I'd taken. The times I questioned my worth. The nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever be seen for more than the title someone else gave me. I thought about Isabel, about the way she tried to shape me into a version of myself that made her shine. And then I thought about the night I let that version die. People call me a tech visionary now, a disruptor, a leader in infrastructure innovation. But inside, I was still that guy with a wrench in his hand. Still the man who believed that everything broken deserved a chance to be fixed, including the way we see ourselves. Sometimes, the most important thing you repair is your own identity. I smiled to myself as I walked back toward the house. Just a plumber, I thought. The man who built an empire while everyone else was looking the other way. And that was enough. I didn't need Isabel's approval. I didn't need her father's toast or her mother's forced politeness. I didn't need anyone to hand me a seat at their table. I had built something. With my own two hands. On my own terms. And for the initial time in years, I felt whole. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe more cities, more contracts, maybe a few more headlines. Maybe not. But I knew one thing with complete certainty. Whatever came next, I'd face it with my boots on and my head held high. Because that's who I've always been. Just a plumber. The man who never stopped fixing things.